Hello, I'm Yvonne Booth. Welcome to the first episode of Arts in Action. This podcast highlights the journey of a few artists who collaborated with the Elwood House Museum and DeKalb County History Center's Arts in Action project. These conversations are curated by local high school students who took part in a journalism project with WNIJ Radio. In this episode, DeKalb High School student Bernice Rivera learns how artist Aaron Coleman uses his craft and background to help lead the youth.
A lot of what I do is for the next generation, the people that are coming up. Like, I want them to see that people ahead of them are talking about this stuff and that they're not afraid to put it out into the world. They're not afraid to make their point.
Coleman is an assistant art professor at the University of Arizona.
You're involved in the Arts in Actions projects. And so there's like 4 stories that are there. And so you have to choose to interpret one of them. So which one did you choose to interpret?
I chose 2 of them, actually. So I made 2 pieces for the exhibition. It's funny when you said you're involved in the Arts in Action program. I was like, wait, what's that? I forgot. I was like, am I doing something I don't know about? But I've totally forgot. Sorry, you gotta understand, it's the end of the semester and it has been like crazy busy. So my brain is like a pile of mush right now. So it's hard because my work, anything I make could have fit any one of the topics that were put forward. You know what I mean? There was a topic about the KKK. There was a topic about redlining. There was a topic about hope, I think. There was a few of them. There's like 4 or 5 of them. And so anything I make deals with those issues. But I've been working on a series of altered coloring book pages. So I'm taking these coloring book pages from the 50s and using black and white paint to cover up parts of the images and parts of the text to like tell different stories or ask questions or make like weird puzzles or conundrums. It's interesting, the paper of the coloring books is so old that it's yellowed over time and it looks like my skin tone. And so then I'm using like black and white, like the 2 pieces of my kind of like ethnic makeup to cover up my own skin tone. So it's this whole weird, like, I don't know, conceptual, like ritual thing. And, but I'm rambling right now, so I'll get back to your question. So I chose the topic about the KKK and I chose the topic about redlining. And really, I didn't pick those 2 because they stood out above the others. I didn't pick those 2 because I was more excited to do those 2. I just was working on 2 particular paintings, and one is like a diagram of wildflowers, and I altered the text so that it reads this kind of narrative about where each one of the wildflowers was found. And it says like, they found our kin. They found one at the side of the road. They found one in a field. They found one in the pulpit. And what people don't realize is that text, like when it says they found our kin, it actually used to say they found 4 kinds. And it was just this innocent sentence about the 4 kinds of wildflowers that these 2 kids in the coloring book found. But when I alter that text and it says they found our kin, all of a sudden there's these like connotations that come up, like who are they and why were they looking for our kin, and why did they find one at the side of the road, and why did they find one in a field? So like these histories start to come up. And then there's that last line, they found one in the pulpit. And so that sentence originally said they found one jack in the pulpit, and a jack in the pulpit is a type of wildflower. But when I alter it to say they found one in the pulpit, you might think about the recent, church shootings, because a pulpit is also, where the preacher stands to give the sermon. And so I'm trying to first of all, I'm trying to rectify the fact that these coloring books ignore everybody but white people, right? And so I'm trying to put the actual history that we've been through into this coloring book page that the coloring book itself ignores. Um, and then I'm also trying to, again, connect stories of the past to current events now. So just by the nature of someone looking at this old antique coloring book, they're reminded of things and images from long ago. But then when you start to read the narrative, these current events start bubbling to the surface, and you realize that, like, yeah, we've come a long way, but it's like two steps, one step forward, two steps back. You know what I mean? Um, and then the other piece that I just happened to be working on, I was working on like 12 of them at the same time. So I was able to kind of just like look at them and see which ones I thought might fit like some of the topics. And the other one that I was working on was this house, and it's a picture of a house down in Georgia. So in the coloring book, the two kids are at their grandfather's farm in Georgia, and they're learning about color by like having fun on his farm. So they see like an apple tree, and it talks about the green leaves and the red apples. There's all these birds in the field, and it talks about like the black birds with the red wings and this and that and the other. But there's this one that talks about this house in the middle of this field, and it's illustrating all of this color, like the green grass and the golden wheat and the blue sky. And when you think about the history of redlining, it's like people were sequestered to specific areas of cities and towns. And, there's like two reasons. One, to keep Black people from interacting with white people. And the other was this like false idea of keeping white people safe, right? And keeping property value up, because if Black people lived in your neighborhood, the value of living there would go down. And so I was thinking about this house in this colorful landscape, and thinking about the way that, Black people have been consistently pushed to the margins so that they don't get to experience like the same colorful landscape that, the majority get to experience. And I'm not saying by any means that Black people haven't created their own colorful landscape. I mean, it's like the most colorful landscape, it's like the richest cultural history and experiences, but it's a different set of cultural histories and experiences than what the majority has had access to. And so by eliminating any chance of color, the house is painted Black, and it's in this like completely white landscape. And then there's these stars in the sky, and there's a sentence that reads, "The stars in the sky look black." And before that, it talks about how they looked out their window and they couldn't see anything. They couldn't see their neighbors, they couldn't see the trees, they couldn't see the clouds. And it says, but they could see the stars, and the stars, I've changed it so it says the stars look black. And I just thought, like, in this kind of desolate white landscape, for this family that lives in this house to be able to like look out their window and see the stars, would be like this extreme moment of peace and like hope. And I think about like Sun Ra, space is the place. I think about like the hip hop group Black Star, and why they chose that name. So yeah, but I mean, those paintings are imbued with a ton of thought and meaning. But I was able to like flip it so that they fit some of the topics that were presented.
So explain your youth in 5 words and how it has shaped you to be who you are today.
Explain my youth in 5 words. Oh man, that is hard. I would say supported as 1. Adventurous is 2. Crazy. Man, I was not ready for a question like that. Diverse, I would say, and influential. So those 5 words, I think, pretty well sum up my youth and my upbringing. I come from a multiracial family, and it was a very supportive family. I had two parents. Luckily, you know, my mother and father were together. They still are. And they just let me do what I want. And I don't mean like they let me run around doing all kinds of crazy stuff. They supported whatever I wanted to do. So if it was music, they supported it. If it was sports, they supported it. If it was, you know, art and things like that, they were all for it. So I had a very supportive upbringing thanks to my parents and my family. I think I maybe use the word adventurous and crazy, and those are maybe the same thing. But, you know, when I hit age like 12, we moved to Indianapolis, and I met a lot of teenagers who were into the like local graffiti scene. And so I spent a lot of time with them, painting walls and bridges and trains, and um, you know, and then that kind of evolved into the same group of people making music together. So we made a lot of music and performed, and so everything we did felt like a crazy adventure. You know, we were just kind of doing whatever we wanted and having a good time, and being super creative and expressing ourselves in a lot of different ways. And so I think those two words definitely sum up ages 12 to 24. We had a lot of fun, I'll say that. Um, Diverse, maybe that's like a goofy kind of hot topic word right now, but I feel really lucky that, you know, the high school I went to, there were people from all over the place. You know, I went to Pike High School in Indianapolis, which is like right smack in the middle of the city. And there was, you know, there was a large Black population, there was a large Hispanic population, there was a large Indian population. So, you know, we had a really diverse group of peers that I grew up with. I don't even remember what the last word I said was already. I forgot it. What was the last word I said? Oh, influential. Yeah. So all of those things, you know, I think the person that I am today is heavily influenced by my life from age 12 to, you know, 25. Those like 12, 13 years really shaped who I am today. And that's where I kind of learned about, you know, patience and acceptance and tolerance, you know, largely from my parents. That's when, you know, my father started kind of telling me, you know, how the world was going to be a little bit different for me, just based on the way that I look. And so, you know, I learned from my mother and my father patience and tolerance and acceptance and consideration for others. And that all that carries through into my work today and what I do. And then, you know, my experiences in the graffiti world and the hip hop scene in Indianapolis, you know, through music, we were sampling other, you know, other styles of music, other genres, you know, music from other eras in history. And so I got this kind of knack for like looking to the past, trying to understand it, and then trying to break it apart and change it. And there's like a similar kind of process in the graffiti world where you're like you're looking at the landscape and kind of twisting it and changing it to do what you want. And so those two things really shaped the way that I approach my work as a studio artist nowadays. I'm always like looking to the past, looking for things that already exist to try to twist them and reshape them, or, you know, find stories that I think are untold or that are being told but the wrong way, and I try to retell those stories. So and then obviously coming from a diverse background and having a lot of like friends and peers from different places, I've grown up realizing the benefits of having people from all different places around you and in the same room working on the same project, and different kinds of minds and collaboration. And so all of those words, you know, they really they definitely impact who I am today. And I would say 100% of the work I make is a direct result from all of that experience.
While I was doing research, I read that you have a white mother and a Black father. So how has that like influenced your work?
Yeah, I mean that I think I could do an hour just on that alone. My father was born in 1938. My mother was born 9 years later. Um, so they grew up when things were going down. You know what I mean? My father lived through the civil rights movement. My father, drank out of black water fountains. He went to a segregated school. My mother grew up super poor. I mean, I'm talking dirt poor, nothing, and it was just her and her mother. Pretty quickly in her life, it became just her and her mother, and they moved from apartment to apartment. And so I think both of them had to go through a whole lot of struggle before they even got together. And once they got together, things just got more difficult because now it's an interracial couple in the United States, which has just never been an easy thing. And so, first and foremost, I just am aware of that history. I'm aware of what my parents have been through and what life must have been like for them. They're not the kind of people that will tell you like all their war stories. I think largely my folks tried to protect me from that for a long time. They just wanted me to be like a happy kid and have a good life. But as I started to get older, I realized that like I didn't quite know where I fit. You know what I mean? Like I wasn't black, I wasn't white. So I had a hard time figuring out my identity and who I was. And when I talk about it now, I sound like I can think about it real deep. But back then it was like just confusing. I wasn't saying this stuff to myself. I was just confused. And I've had experiences, like my first girlfriend, I remember her mother telling me she was white. And I remember her mother telling me that the bluebirds don't mix with the redbirds. I had another girlfriend whose mother called my father to express her concerns, to put it nicely, about her daughter dating a person of color. I had another girlfriend's mom who took me down into their basement to show me a picture of, the firemen shooting a fire hose at black children and pushing them up against a chain link fence. And at the bottom, there was a little caption that said, last one over the fence is an N-word. And like, she took me downstairs to show me that. So, and even when all those things happened, I still didn't quite like, it just didn't register. You know what I mean? Like, I still was just like, what are you showing me this for? Because I never like identified as black. You know what I mean? Because I wasn't like mature enough to think about it like that. I for sure never identified as white. That's 100% true. And so I had a hard time like fitting in. I had a hard time like understanding where I belonged and where I felt most comfortable. And to be honest, hip hop like changed all of that for me. You know what I mean? When I saw Africa Bambaataa and like the Zulu Nation block parties that he would throw, there would be like black DJs, white DJs, there would be black MCs, white MCs, there would be break dancers, like Hispanic and Asian break dancers that were just melting everybody. You know what I mean? They were just so good. And graffiti writers that came from LA and Chicago and New York and Texas and Tennessee and the Midwest. And they were all, it was all different kinds of people. And so hip hop, if you think about it as this like umbrella, you got breakdancing, graffiti, DJs, and MCs all under this umbrella. And that for me was like this little micro utopia. It was like the first time I felt like rather than not belonging anywhere, I could belong everywhere. You know what I mean? Like the music was pulling from all these different cultures, the fashion was pulling from all different places and eras in history. So that really like that was like a game changer for me as far as being like biracial and finding a community and feeling like I had something that I could call my own, um, and that I belonged with like all these other people. So I mean, I could go on and on about my experiences as a biracial person, but I think the way that it influences my work today. I mean, I make work about racial issues. I make work about the history of race, the idea of race, where it comes from, why it was created, you know, um, and who benefits from it and who doesn't, all those kinds of things. And I think in a weird way, I feel weird saying this, but in a strange way, being black and white, I think gives me a unique perspective on the topic. And I think in some cases it's a good thing. Like I have a certain level of safety because of the lightness of my skin. Definitely there are some privileges that come with that.
That's
If you don't shut me up, I'll just keep talking.
so with all this like experience and your background, how did that influence you to like start teaching art?
That's another like multi multi-point question. Um, I mean, so I went to grad school, and a big part of going to grad school, at least in the art world, is you teach. That's a way to get funding. It's you get paid to teach as a grad student, so that helps you pay for school. Sometimes you get a scholarship, for teaching, things like that. And when I was in grad school, well, first of all, when I was in undergrad, I never had any mentors of color at all. And when I was in grad school, I never had any mentors of color, not a single one. And when I really think about it, all the way back to high school, I didn't even have any black or brown teachers. The only two people of color I knew were the assistant dean and the in-school suspension teacher. And so I would get in trouble and I'd go see the dean, the assistant dean who was black, and he would send me to the in-school suspension guy who was black. And those are the only two black people I ever met. And I was always in trouble when I met them. Um, they were both super cool, and they both really cared about me. You know what I mean? And it was very clear that like they were not there just to punish me. Like they wanted me to be all right, and I could tell. But then going to college, I never had any black professors. Going to grad school, I never had any black or brown professors. And so when I started teaching in grad school, I had Hispanic students, I had black students, I had Asian students, and I mean, I had white students too. Uh, but I think really quickly, I realized that there was like a connection that I had to students from underrepresented backgrounds just because of the way that I speak, the way that I like move, the way that I dress. It's just not what they were used to seeing in that position. You know what I mean? As someone like at the head of a classroom or in a position of authority. And I'm not saying that they never came across a person of color in those positions, but in academia, it's rare. It's just not the norm. And so I connected with all my students, but I felt like a two-way connection with the students from underrepresented backgrounds. In one way, I could tell that they liked being around me. I could tell that they liked taking the class. I could tell that they appreciated my feedback, and they listened, and they took it seriously. But when I say two-way, I mean I also had some very deep realizations for myself. That was like the first time I realized what was missing from my entire life of education. I realized like that connection I never had, not once.
No, yeah. And then like it's important that like students have a representation of like authority and all that because it's like I feel like it's important because it could shape them and it can inspire them to be like them or to go even further. So that's It's really
Yeah.
powerful.
Yeah, I totally
So
agree.
yeah, so you're an artist, and then there's different types of media that artists use. What is your preferred media?
Oof. I don't think I have a preferred media per se. Definitely when I was in school, I was a printmaker. I was formally trained as a printmaker. I went to grad school for printmaking. I made prints the whole time I was in grad school. So I made etchings and lithographs and screen prints. And, there was people always ask me why I was making prints, and I didn't really have a good answer. I just liked making prints. I like the process. It's a very process heavy medium. There's a lot of technical parts to the process, and I just liked that. I think what drew me to it the most was that you have to use all these big pieces of equipment to make the work. So there's like big presses, and you need like good ventilation. So you have to have like ventilation booths, and you're using acid and chemicals. So you need like specific facilities for that. And what that means is everybody that's taking those classes needs all that same stuff too. And it's not like you can set that. I mean, I'm in a tiny little room that you see here. I can't fit a press in here. And so I had to go to the shop to use the press. And that meant I was always around other people doing the same thing. So there's like a built-in community to printmaking that was really exciting and energetic. So I I still consider myself a printmaker. Um, and I still do make prints occasionally, not nearly as much as I used to. But I think the older I get, the more my ideas develop, the more that I realize that the materials I'm using need to have conceptual value or weight to them. And so um, it's no longer just about like drawing a picture of a thing or painting an image of a thing or something that's happening or a person. Like I want to make objects, and I want to build up the surfaces of my two-dimensional work with like rust and patinas and tar and you know astroturf, rubber crumb, and like the craziest materials. But you may read like the materials list under one of my mixed media works on paper and see astroturf, rubber crumb, and it seems like this totally random material. But then when you think about like the history of exploitation of people of color in sports, then astroturf all of a sudden has this like conceptual weight to it, and the rubber crumb is this like black glittery material that keeps the turf standing up straight. And so it's not only this like fundamental material that's a part of that history, but visually it's black and it's glittery, and it's like bringing this richness to the color black that I think like black people embody, you know what I mean? Like this kind of special quality. And so when you ask like what's my preferred medium, I would say whatever material communicates the idea that I'm trying to get across is what I'm going to use at this point.
And I imagine during those processes of making like your artwork and using different types of media, you go through periods of time. Like, do you go through periods of time where you're just like blank, have no ideas?
Yes, for sure. I think everybody does. I think any artist or writer or and maybe like a chef, you know what I mean? I think any kind of like creative maker profession or trade where you're like creating something from nothing. I think everybody goes through those periods where you're drawing a blank, and there's little tricks like cleaning your room or like, taking a walk or whatever. I think for me, it's less about running out of ideas or not having an idea at the moment, and it's more like an ebb and flow of energy and exhaustion. Specifically because I make work about really difficult topics. And so, I don't just make work like reactionary. I do a lot of research. And so I read about history, and then I read about current events, and I try to connect those. I try to put those together so I can try to understand like where we've been and where we are and where we're going and why things are the way they are. And then I try to tell those stories, and emotionally easy stories to tell. And so what ends up happening is I get like really fired up about something, and I make a body of work, and at the end of that I'm just exhausted, you know, physically, mentally, emotionally. I'm just tired. And so I go through these periods of time where I have to do something like really, really stupid to make myself feel better. So I make like really goofy little collages when that happens, of like tiny little comic book characters inside uh like churches and cathedrals. So I find these like I don't know, I got one here. The people listening to this won't be able to see it, but you can see it. You know what I mean? It's like a dude looking out a window in like an epic hallway, and there's like a beautiful sunset in the back. It's real stupid and silly, but like it's something that occupies my mind and kind of like rescues me from the sad stuff that I deal with on a daily basis. It's like I said, it's not so much that I draw a blank. I just hit these periods of time where I have to do something that isn't about an end result. You know what I mean? It's not about production or producing something for a show or making something that somebody's going to see and think about it.
And like your work, I was looking through your work while I was doing my research, and when you said that you like to like draw characters in like churches, it reminded me of some of your pieces of artwork that look like stained glass windows in churches, and so it was like, wow, you know. So
Yeah.
we're in like a global pandemic, right? Obviously. So there's a lot of things happening. So how has like COVID impacted your work, and like how has it like impacted like the thought process behind it?
Yeah, I mean, it's been major, you know. I mean, there's the obvious things of like isolation, quarantine, you know, the general anxiety about getting sick and you know, like am I going to end up on a ventilator? The kind of the like collective grief of all the people who passed away from the virus, the kind of total uprooting of like normalcy in everyday life. You know, I realized how much I actually get from my students, like fulfillment wise, and so that like not being around my students was really hard. Um, but I think more so than all those kinds of things, um, you know, when everybody on the planet is stuck in their house in 2020 or 2021, everybody's going to be on their phone. Everybody's going to be on their computer. And that means everybody's going to be on social media. And so I think in part, that's why we're seeing a lot of the social political movements that we're seeing right now, because it's not like this stuff that I'm dealing with wasn't happening before. It just wasn't in everybody's face. You know, they weren't looking for it every day or being exposed to it every day. Um, and so everybody that's stuck at home is flipping through Instagram and flipping through Facebook, and they're seeing videos of people being killed by police. They're seeing, you know, indigenous people fighting for their land. They're seeing, you know, non-binary, genderqueer folks fighting for their rights and space to live peacefully. You know, there's all this, there's just a ton of stuff going on. And so I think in one sense, it's been very empowering. It's been very motivating to see all like the whole world kind of stand up and start fighting for what I think is right, all the things that I think are right. On the other hand, it is very difficult to be presented with this like daily trauma that I'm already experiencing, I'm already researching, I'm already looking for it, you know, so I can know it and understand it and prepare for it and protect myself and my family. But when everybody on the planet is posting these videos and these articles, it is like it's like a tidal wave of grief. So again, it's these ebbs and flows. You know, you might see a protest and get really energized and want to go make some work or want to go do something. And then the next day you might see 5 videos of black men, black women getting shot or beat or, you know, whatever, and it just knocks the wind out of you. So I think, you know, the pandemic, I I've probably had a very similar experience to everybody else that's dealing with it. I'm not gonna pretend like I'm special or like my feelings are hurt more because I didn't lose anybody. You know what I mean? And people did. Um, but it brought on a whole lot of other stuff that I was just not mentally ready for. I was not ready for the whole world to show me Black Death all at once. So it's been real up and down.
Yeah, and I think nobody was ready for what was to happen this year and the year before. And so in an interview like a couple of years ago, you said that like something around the lines of like people who can't control aspects of their like humanity and all that. You said something around those lines in 2014. And so like it's really important to realize how there hasn't been that much change since 2014, but at the same time, there has. But it's like you said before, like one step forward and then like two steps backwards.
I mean, if you can think about it, if you can like break it down to like a real stupid level, like a real simple, like unreasonably simple level, and pretend like there's two sides, right? There's like good and evil, right? And so when we say nothing has changed, what we really mean is on the good side, things are changing, but also on the bad side, things are still going. And it's like both sides are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So it feels like we're spinning our tires. You know what I mean? It feels like the more people that are saying Black Lives Matter, the more people that are saying protect trans kids, the more people that are saying like her body, her choice. There's an equal amount of expansion on the opposite side. And so it just always, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer. I don't want to be like gloom and doom and say that nothing's changing. It just always feels like it's like both sides are getting bigger. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And so you display this throughout your work. You try to display these messages in order for people to understand. And so your artwork has been displayed around the world. So how do you feel about this and like the message that you're trying to spread?
I don't know. I mean, on a basic level, it's like it's success, I guess, right? Like I make work. I put a lot of time and effort into it, and I want people to see it, and I want it to be seen, and I want to make an impact. So the more places it goes, the better, right? And I feel successful. I feel like I'm doing my job. I feel like I'm doing a good job. On another level, it's very strange to make work about this stuff. And people always ask me how do I feel as an activist, and I'm like, I don't think I'm an activist. Like maybe, but I just have a very different like mental picture of what activism is. A lot of what I do is for young people. A lot of what I do is for my students, and not my students aren't all young, but early stage students. A lot of what I do is for the next generation, the people that are coming up. Like I want them to see that people ahead of them are talking about this stuff and that they're not afraid to put it out into the world. They're not afraid to make their point. They're not afraid to challenge the status quo or the history that they're probably still being taught in middle school and high school. You know what I mean? Like if you come out of high school and you've been given a certain history and then you get into college and like everything is different, holy cow. I mean, that can rock your world. You know what I mean? But if you see someone that comes from the same background as you, if you see someone that looks like you and talks like you and understands your references, and they can help you navigate that, and they can help you like dig into what you care about and what you're interested in. If me making the work that I make does that for anybody, then that's it. I'm done. I won the game. You know what I mean? That's all I need. I don't need to sell any art. I don't need to be in any big shows. I don't need to be on the cover of whatever paper or magazine. I don't even look at the newspaper. You know what I mean? I don't like getting that weird ink on my fingers. It feels weird. It looks weird. You know what I mean? So I don't need any of that. I make work for my students, I make work for my colleagues, I make work for my parents, I make work for my family. I want people that care to know that other people care too.
You say that you want to like that your work is for like people like around the world. And so what advice would you give to those people that want to be like you or like something around those lines?
You don't want to be like me. You want to be like you. You know what I mean? Like I think I mean if somebody is like inspired by me, I feel good about that. You know what I mean? But my goal, especially with my students, I mean anybody I meet, I hope that I have this, like I hope this rubs off on them, but because I'm a professor, the main population of people that I interact with are students. And so my main goal, the thing I try to do the most is instill in them an understanding that their perspective and their interests are valid points for a studio practice. So wherever you come from, whatever your familial history is, whatever your cultural background is, the language you speak, the music you listen to, the books you read, I often ask my students like, what do you collect? Because it sounds like a really weird question, but you'd be surprised how many people think that the thing they care about the most in their daily life has nothing to do with their art practice. You know what I mean? Like you probably, when you looked at my work, you probably saw a bunch of comic book imagery. And that I got a box full of comic books right next to me right now. Like your interests, the things that you care about, the things that make you happy, the things that get you energized, are all valid sources for writing or singing or dance or making art. So I think I really just want my students to know that. I want them to know that they can tap into like their personhood and make art from that point of view, that they don't have to make like an old master drawing, they don't have to make like a hyper realistic photorealistic painting, because why do we need more of that? You know what I mean? If you want to do that, great. But if you want to paint like your ancestors did, then do it. If you want to paint if you want to draw or paint or collage total abstract color fields that are influenced by like serape textiles, you know what I mean, then do it. Like that's you. So that's my goal. That's what I hope.
Okay, so looking like where you are now and like your goals and the things you've accomplished, what would be the advice that you would give to your younger self?
If I could talk to my younger self, I'd probably say slow your roll, man. I would be like, you need to chill out. I'm extremely lucky. I'm a very lucky person. And I mean that in like the biggest sense of the word. My lifestyle for a long time was not like a safe lifestyle. I'm trying to watch like what I say here, you know what I mean? But I think I would just tell myself to pay attention. I would tell myself to slow down and pay attention, because I went through a lot of motions. I was oblivious to a lot of things that I experienced because I was caught up in like a fast life. At one point I was working at Blockbuster, which was like my favorite job ever. But I was also doing a bunch of other dumb stuff. And my mom, was like, look, you got to do something. You need to go to grad school or start trying to find a better job or something. And she was seriously worried about me. And my response was just like, okay, like whatever. So I applied to a bunch of grad schools because she basically made me. And I got rejected from 5 schools. I applied to 6. I got rejected from 5. You know what I mean? And then I got accepted to 1, and I was like, okay, you know what I mean? Like it didn't even register that 5 other institutions were like, no, this dude is not for us. You know what I mean? It didn't even I was just like, okay, whatever. And then I went to grad school and I was like, okay, whatever. You know what I mean? Like, I think if I had been around mentors that like really cared, you know what I mean, about like a student of color, I think someone would have shook me out of that because, my father was always, my parents were like, listen, you got to get this together. They would give me lectures like a parent would do, but you don't always listen to your parents. But when someone outside says something to you, it can really shake you. It can change the way you see things. And so, I don't know. I would give myself a whole lot of advice, but I think the main would be slow down and pay attention. Like, I wish I had stopped and taken the time to understand like the choices I was making and the potential impacts the negative impacts that they could have had on my life. And I know I've talked a bit about not having a mentor of color in my educational career, but I did have really amazing mentors in grad school. I mean, Michael Barnes and Ashley Nason, Michael Barnes is still at NIU. They were amazing humans. They were kind, they were caring, they were supportive, they pushed me, they challenged me, they built me up, they taught me. So it's not like I didn't have good mentors. I just didn't have someone who kind of like knew where I was coming from and understood what I might be going through. So yeah, applying to grad school was ridiculous, but it worked out. It all worked out.
Yeah. And I think many in that process feel the same or like stressed. Personally, I don't know what that feels like. I'll learn later, but not now.
I think
So
I think things now they're like illuminated more than they used to be. So I would say when you're applying to college or when you're applying to grad school, you should be excited about that. It's hard and it's a lot of work, but you are like really putting a lot of time and energy into who you're going to be, you know what I mean? And what the world is going to bring to you. And so, start thinking about it now. You're a sophomore. There's nothing wrong with like looking out into the world at schools to see who's teaching there, what they're interested in, what their research is, because you might find someone that changes your life completely. You know what I mean? And so that should be really exciting. I'm not the best case study. I complain about it with a smile on my face,
so is there anything else that you would like to say?
Keep your chin up, everybody. Anybody who hears this, there's people out there that are just like you. It's a whole lot of people out there that aren't like you. And my father used to say it takes all types, and I'm a firm believer in that. So, it's good to have people that you look up to, but you should look up to yourself. You are the biggest inspiration for yourself that ever exists. So trust yourself and believe in yourself. How's that for a ending thought?
Good. I have one more thing to add. So how can people keep up with you and your work?
If you want to see like my work proper, you can go to my website, which is www.aaroncolemanprintmaking.com. If you want to see what I do on like a daily basis or in progress stuff, or me, like, I don't know, I post a lot of stuff on Instagram, but it's at Aaron_S_Coleman. I don't really mess with Twitter or Facebook or anything like that, but yeah.
Well, thank you for allowing us to have this opportunity to talk with you. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was a pleasure.
Arts in Action gives the community a chance to see DeKalb's history through the use of art. The online exhibit is available at dchcexhibits.org. Join us next time to hear high school student Will Donahoe chat with artist Terrence Gray.